My name is Eleanor Vance. Not Vance by choice, but by blood. A blood that for the longest time felt more like a murky stain on my soul than a source of connection. Growing up in the quaint, postcard-perfect town of Havenwood, Connecticut, our house was the quintessential New England dream. White picket fence, sprawling lawn, and a 2-story colonial that screamed successful, happy family. But behind those pristine walls, the truth was far more fractured. It started subtly. Little digs, casual dismissals. My parents, Richard and Patricia, painted this picture of idyllic family life with my siblings, golden boy Ethan and ever-graceful Olivia, always at the center. Me? I was off to the side, a quirky footnote. I remember Christmas when I was 6. Ethan got the new Turbo Blaster 9000 gaming system. Olivia received a porcelain dollhouse that probably cost more than my tuition would for a year, if they had ever planned on sending me. Me? I unwrapped a massive, leather-bound encyclopedia. An encyclopedia? My mother's voice dripped with a mixture of amusement and mild disgust. Well, that's, certainly you, Eleanor. Who do you take after? You're such an odd one. That was the first time I felt the sting of being different. The words were like tiny shards of ice lodging in my chest. It's a weird thing, remembering pain so vividly. I can still feel it like it just happened. My grandparents, bless their souls, were the only ones who seemed to see me. They'd slip me books on quantum physics, whisper words of encouragement about my science fair projects, and their eyes would light up with pride when I explained some new, complicated theorem. "Eleanor, your mind is a gift," my grandmother, Nana Vivian, would say, her voice raspy but full of warmth. "Don't let anyone dim that light. The world needs what you have." And she'd always slip me a book, like a sacred offering, something about math or maybe art, with a wink and a, "This is our little secret now." My grandfather, Papa George, was a taciturn man, but he'd always have a sketchbook and pencils ready for me. "A bright mind needs a creative outlet, Ellie," he'd say, his calloused hand gently ruffling my hair. Those stolen moments with them, those were my lifeline. Everything else? It was just noise. The summer before I turned 13, I poured myself into a science fair project. I was obsessed with solar energy and convinced I could find a more efficient way to capture it. Weeks melted into sleepless nights in the garage, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the burning desire to prove something. Though at the time, I wasn't sure what. I won. First place. The judges gushed, calling me a promising young scientist and predicting a bright future. I practically floated home, eager to share the news with my family. My mother barely glanced up from basting a chicken. "Oh, that's nice, dear. Now, I need you to help set up for Olivia's dance recital tomorrow." My father grunted from behind his newspaper. "Good for you," he said, without even a hint of eye contact. The next day was my birthday. They forgot. Completely. The day was filled with frantic preparations for Olivia's dance recital. I was relegated to fetching snacks, sweeping floors, and running errands. Not a single happy birthday passed their lips. Later that evening, when the last sequin had been glued and the minivan packed, my grandparents showed up at the door. They were breathless and apologetic. "We are so sorry, sweetie," Nana Vivian said, pulling me into a hug. "We would have been here sooner, but, well, you know." They took me out for a quiet dinner at a little Italian place. Papa George presented me with a beautiful leather-bound sketchbook and a set of high-quality drawing pencils. "A bright mind like yours needs a creative outlet," he said, his eyes twinkling. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When we got home, my parents were furious. "Where have you been?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp. "Eleanor had chores to do. You can't just whisk her away like that." "It was her birthday, Patricia," Nana Vivian said, her voice trembling slightly. "This isn't your problem, Mom," my mother snapped, her face flushed. That was the day my grandparents started to pull back, to become more cautious in their defense of me. They knew they couldn't protect me from the constant, subtle erosion of my spirit. They tried, but their impact was limited. It was a silent acknowledgement of the power dynamic within our family. The seed of resentment took root, and it started to grow. Senior year of high school, college application time. I poured my heart and soul into my applications, aiming high, daring to dream. I wanted to go to MIT. It was a long shot, I knew, but I had to try. My father found my application while rummaging through my desk. He picked it up, his brow furrowed. MIT? He scoffed. Be realistic, Eleanor. Those universities aren't for you. Consider the local community college. It's more appropriate. I nodded silently, swallowing the lump in my throat. But inside, a fire ignited. I would prove him wrong. Weeks later, the acceptance letter arrived, a thick envelope with the MIT logo. And inside, the words I had dreamed of. We are pleased to offer you admission. Full scholarship. I couldn't contain my excitement. I burst into the living room, waving the letter in the air. My mother's jaw dropped. My father's face turned a shade of purple I didn't know existed. Well, you're lucky, he said coldly. They probably needed a charity case. Ethan naturally laughed. No one will believe you got into MIT, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. That night, I cried myself to sleep. But amidst the tears, a vow was made. I would succeed. I would prove my worth. Not to them, but to myself. My 4 years at MIT were a blur of late nights, challenging courses, and the exhilarating feeling of finally being surrounded by people who understood me. I rarely went home for breaks. The library became my sanctuary, my escape from the suffocating atmosphere of Havenwood. At the behest of Nana and Papa, I attended family gatherings once every few years. Awkward, stilted affairs, where I felt like a stranger in my own home. I kept my distance. I focused on my future. I built a wall around my heart. After graduation, I landed a job as an entry-level programmer at a major tech company. It was a good job, stable, with decent pay. But it wasn't enough. At 25, I decided to take the plunge. I quit my job and started my own business. A startup focused on AI-powered security systems. I rented a cheap garage on the outskirts of the city and poured my savings into equipment. Sleepless nights were spent hunched over a keyboard, fueled by ramen noodles and the burning conviction that I was onto something big. The image recognition algorithm I developed was revolutionary. It outperformed industry standards by 30%. When a tech magazine featured my discovery, a prominent Silicon Valley investor called it groundbreaking and offered me $5 million in seed funding. Suddenly, everything changed. My company, Sentinel AI, began to attract attention. My technology was adopted by major banks and government agencies. I hired employees, expanding from a one-woman show to a team of 150. Forbes magazine listed me as one of the top entrepreneurs under 30. The week of my 28th birthday, I announced another breakthrough, a new security protocol that combined blockchain and AI. It was proven to prevent 99.8% of data breaches. The offers came flooding in. Acquisition offers from 5 major tech companies. Eventually, I agreed to sell Sentinel AI to a global tech giant for an astounding $850 million. I was rich, beyond my wildest dreams. And then, the phone rang. It was Ethan. This is where it gets really interesting. Ethan's voice was different. Gone was the condescending tone, replaced by a syrupy sweetness that made my skin crawl. Eleanor, that's incredible, he gushed. We all saw the news. Wow. Then came the inevitable ask. Listen, I'm actually in a bit of a bind, he confessed. Struggling with a car loan. You know how it is. My first instinct was to hang up, to tell him to get lost. But something inside me flickered. A tiny ember of hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a turning point. For years, I had craved their approval. I wanted to be acknowledged as a true member of the family, not just the odd one out. I thought that maybe if I helped them, they would finally see my worth. And if I'm being honest, there was a part of me that wanted to flaunt my success, to show my family, who had always looked down on me, that I was now successful enough to financially assist them. It was petty, I know, but I'm not perfect. I ended up sending him $50,000. He promised to pay it back. He never did. Next came Olivia. Her husband's business had failed, and they were about to lose their house. She needed $30,000 as temporary help. I sent the money. Months later, I saw photos of their European vacation on social media. The disappointment was indescribable. My parents were no different. At first, they were modest, but soon the requests began to accumulate. A new car for my father, necessary cosmetic surgery for my mother, renovations for their house. The list went on and on. Each time I fulfilled their requests, all I got in return were superficial words of thanks. They never asked about my life, my feelings, my struggles. They simply exploited my success. In 1 year, I had loaned over $150,000 to my family. Our conversations always revolved around what they wanted next. They chose to exploit my success rather than acknowledge it. I began to avoid family gatherings and stopped responding to their calls. I was their personal ATM, nothing more. But everything changed on Thanksgiving night. It started with a phone call. My grandmother. "Eleanor, please," she pleaded. "I want you to come for Thanksgiving this year. We're having dinner at the Grand Plaza. Without you, the family isn't complete." Her words struck a chord. Despite everything, a part of me still longed for that connection. "All right, Nana," I said, sighing. "I'll come. For you." I wore my finest black suit to the Grand Plaza. The suit I had worn on the day I closed my first big deal. It gave me the confidence I needed. As I entered the restaurant, my family was already seated at a long table. My grandparents, my parents, Ethan, Olivia, her husband Brian, and their kids. They were laughing and talking, a scene from a movie I was never cast in. "Eleanor!" Ethan called out, his smile seeming pleasant, but his eyes were cold. He pointed to an empty seat at the end of the table. "It's been a while. Come sit here." As I moved towards the indicated seat, Ethan spoke up again. "Sorry," he chuckled, pointing to a spot slightly away from the table near the restrooms. "That seat is for family." "Slaves eat in the toilet." Snickers arose around the table. My mother and father wore barely restrained smiles. Only my grandparents looked horrified. "How long do you intend to keep making such childish jokes?" I asked, maintaining my composure. I called over a waiter and asked him to bring another chair near the table. Leaving crossed my mind, but this was an opportunity to confront this. I decided to settle things with my family right there and then. "What will you order?" the waiter asked. "I'll just have a coffee," I replied. "Coffee only?" My mother frowned. "It's Thanksgiving." "I'm not hungry," I lied. In reality, I wanted to conserve my energy for what was to come. "Well, everyone," Ethan raised his voice, "tonight is a special night. Order whatever you like." He smirked at me. I ignored him. One by one, everyone chose the most expensive items on the menu. Lobster, caviar, vintage wine. Their orders became increasingly costly. Ridiculous. "Let's toast," Ethan raised his glass, "to family reunions." While everyone toasted, I just held my coffee cup without moving. As dinner progressed, I let myself be carried along by their conversation. Ethan's golf scores, Olivia's new pool house, gossip about relatives. The conversation moved on, ignoring my presence. "So, Eleanor," my father suddenly turned to me. "What was it? Computer job? How is it?" "It's technology investment," I replied calmly. "It's going well, thank you." Is that so? Is that so?" My father nodded, but there was no understanding in his eyes. When the meal ended and the desserts were cleared, the waiter brought a small black tray to the table. On it was a single bill. "Here is the check," he said, placing the tray in front of my father. Ethan quickly grabbed it and thrust it in front of me. I looked at the bill, shocked. $4,387. It was an unbelievable amount. "This is..." I lost my words. "Oh, Eleanor, don't worry about it," Ethan said smoothly. "It's a trivial amount for you, isn't it?" Expectant faces spread around the table. They assumed I would pay. Was this their plan all along? To invite me just to make me foot the bill? "What are you talking about, Eleanor?" My mother feigned confusion. "This is a family gathering." "Yes, a family gathering," I said quietly. "But have you ever treated me as part of the family?" Silence fell over the table. "You're successful now," my father finally said. "You should share a bit. We're family, right?" Those words broke something inside me. "Family?" My voice trembled. "You have treated me as an oddity since I was a child. Far from celebrating my success, you've been jealous. And now you're reaching for my money again. Is this what family is? Don't exaggerate, Eleanor, Ethan said with a nervous laugh. It's just a dinner bill. Just a dinner bill of 4,387 hours, Ethan? I pushed the bill towards him. You pay it. You're joking, right? His face turned red. We all ordered thinking you would pay. That's the problem. I stood up. You've always mocked me, and now you only think of using me because I'm successful. But it's over now. I grabbed my smartphone from my bag and searched for Wayne in my contacts. Wayne Jackson was my partner and one of the best lawyers in New York. Eleanor? His voice came through the phone. What's going on? Wayne, I'm sorry to bother you, but can you come to the Grand Plaza? I said. There's a legal issue here that only you can resolve. I'll be there in 10 minutes, he responded immediately. As I hung up, tension filled the air around the table. Did you call a lawyer? Olivia asked in disbelief. Yes, I replied calmly. I think this is an attempt at fraud. You tried to deceive me into paying a high bill. I'll have my lawyer assess the situation. Wait a minute, Eleanor, my mother said, unable to hide her panic. This is a family matter. There's no need to involve outsiders. It's too late now, I said. You've been mocking me for a long time. That ends tonight. What happens next changes everything. 10 minutes later, Wayne Jackson walked into the restaurant. He was dressed in an elegant gray suit and moved with a confidence that spoke of his courtroom experience. A dignified aura surrounded him. He had a way of commanding attention without saying a word. Eleanor, he said, approaching and giving me a light kiss on the cheek. What's happening? I briefly explained the situation. Wayne looked at the bill and frowned. This is clearly premeditated, he said in a professional tone. Inviting you here, and then, without prior agreement, expecting you to cover an expensive bill is problematic. You're joking, right? Ethan stood up, his face flushed. This is just a family dinner. There's no problem here? And you are? Wayne turned to him. Collins, Kevin Collins. Well, Mr. Collins, this can be seen as an intentional attempt to impose an unfair financial burden on Eleanor. Wayne's voice was calm, but it carried weight, especially since you initially insulted her and then expected her to pay. Insult? My father exclaimed, his face reddening. What are you talking about? Wayne turned to him. The fact that Kevin initially used the term slave towards Eleanor is a clear insult. Silence fell around the table. Everyone started at Kevin, who shrunk back. Let's resolve this simply, Wayne continued. Everyone pays for their own orders, and this issue is resolved. That's ridiculous, Ethan shouted. We can't afford such amounts. Then why did you order them? Wayne asked calmly. Was it not because you assumed Eleanor would cover the costs? Silence dominated the table. Please understand, Wayne continued. This isn't just a family meal. It appears to be a premeditated attempt to use Eleanor. If you refuse to pay, we may need to take legal action. Wait, my mother hurriedly said. This is a misunderstanding. We just wanted to have a meal with Eleanor. Then why did you call her a slave? Wayne pressed. Why did you order expensive menu items without her consent? Wayne, that's enough. I put my hand on his arm. It's clear now. They don't see me as family. To them, I'm just an ATM. Suddenly, my grandmother slammed her hand on the table. That's enough, she said, her voice trembling with anger. As the eldest in this family, I will not tolerate such behavior. She glared at my parents and siblings. You have treated Eleanor terribly. You've looked down on her since she was a child. And now, when she's successful, you want to ride on her coattails. Grandma, Ethan tried to protest, but she raised her hand to stop him. I'm not finished, she said sternly. Richard, Patricia, you should have loved and supported your daughter fairly. But you've always alienated Eleanor. And now, all of you have plotted this disgraceful scheme. Mom, that's not true. My father tried to argue, but she ignored him. Eleanor, she turned to me, her eyes softening. You have grown into a strong woman. I am so proud of you, and if you choose to distance yourself from this family, I understand. Her words deeply resonated with me. My grandmother had always been my ally, but she had never defended me in public with such a strong stance before. "Thank you, Nana," I said, feeling tears welling up in my eyes. "So, what shall we do about this?" Wayne picked up the bill again. "Legally, everyone should pay for their own orders. However, realistically, I will pay," my grandfather suddenly said. He had been quiet until now, but there was a look of determination in his eyes. "But there is a condition," he said, looking directly at my parents, Ethan and Olivia. "All of you must apologize to Eleanor and ask for her forgiveness. Otherwise, I will exclude you from my will, and the inheritance will go entirely to Eleanor." A murmur spread around the table. "Dad, you're joking, right?" my father said, his face ashen. "I'm not joking, Richard," my grandfather said sternly. "I have been disappointed by your behavior for a long time. Tonight is the last straw." Ethan blushed and reluctantly turned towards me. "Eleanor, I'm sorry." His words lacked sincerity. My parents and Olivia also mumbled formal apologies. "Is that satisfactory?" my grandfather asked me. I nodded slightly and looked at Wayne. "Yes, this resolves it." Wayne took a card out of his wallet and handed it to the waiter. I took Wayne's arm and stood up. "Let's go," I said quietly. Before leaving the table, I approached my grandparents and hugged them gently. "Thank you, Nana, Papa," I whispered. "You are the only true family I have." "Call anytime, sweetie," she said, holding my hand. "You're not alone." We left the restaurant. As we stepped outside, the cold air of the New York night brushed against my face. It felt like it was heralding a new beginning. I felt lighter, as if a weight I'd carried for years had finally lifted. I still loved my parents and siblings, but I didn't need them. Standing on the balcony of Wayne's luxurious apartment, we looked down at the Manhattan nightscape. The city lights twinkled like stars. "I'm really sorry to have involved you in this," I said. "I didn't expect things to turn out like this tonight." Wayne smiled gently. "I'd do anything for you, Eleanor. Besides, their behavior was definitely problematic." "But you couldn't actually have sued them, could you?" I asked, tilting my head. He chuckled, looking at me. "To be honest, it would have been difficult," he admitted, "but they didn't need to know that." He winked. We laughed, and then I took a deep breath. I've been troubled by my relationship with them for a long time. I always felt like an outsider, as if I had no value. But tonight, I finally drew a line for myself. "You are an amazing woman, Eleanor." Wayne touched my cheek. "Talented, intelligent, and compassionate. It's their loss if they can't see that." "Thank you." I held his hand, his soft skin against mine. "I'm truly grateful to have you by my side." Wayne looked slightly bewildered. Then he reached into his pocket. "Actually," he said, pulling out a small blue velvet box. "I was planning to give this to you tonight." He slowly knelt down and opened the box. Inside, a beautiful diamond ring sparkled. "Eleanor Vance, I want to walk through life with you. I am impressed every day by your strength, intellect, and kindness. Will you marry me?" Tears overflowed in my eyes. "Yes, Wayne," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Of course, yes." He slid the ring onto my finger and stood up to embrace me. Our kiss was filled with the promise of a new beginning. Late that night, my smartphone rang. It was a message from my grandmother. "I am proud of your courage. It's wonderful that you've learned to know and protect your worth. I love you, Eleanor, and Wayne is a good man." I smiled as I replied, "Thank you, Nana. I wouldn't be who I am today without your support. I love you." Looking out the window, I saw the first light of dawn beginning to illuminate the sky. A new day, a new beginning. For a long time, I had sought my family's approval. But now I had learned to accept myself and recognize my own worth. Sometimes, the most difficult choices are the most necessary. Distancing myself from my family had been painful, but it was also the first step towards self-respect and healing. I smiled as I saw Wayne sleeping peacefully beside me. Together, we would build a new family. A family based on love, respect, and understanding. I didn't have to worry about what my real family did to me. The next morning, an unexpected situation arose. I received a call from an unknown number. Is this Eleanor Vance? A young woman's voice asked. I'm Sandra Brown from the New York Daily. Could you comment on last night's incident at the Grand Plaza? What incident? I asked, confused. A video capturing your family insulting you has gone viral on social media, she explained. It's currently trending. I stood frozen. Wayne quickly took out his smartphone and started searching. Ah, this, he said, showing me the screen. The video, secretly filmed by a guest at the next table, showed Ethan calling me a slave and the entire family laughing. Then, it showed me calling Wayne, my lawyer, and my grandfather, eventually paying the bill. Everything was vividly captured. I was at a loss for words. It has already been viewed over 1 million times, Wayne said quietly. The comments are overwhelmingly supportive of you. Over the next few days, the situation escalated. Ethan's workplace was identified, and his social media accounts were flooded with critical comments. Olivia's fashion blog was labeled as hypocritical. Paparazzi appeared in front of my parents' house, tracking their daily movements. Local newspapers contrasted my success story with my family's cruel behavior. An article titled, "How a Genius Entrepreneur Was Alienated by Her Family" was shared nationally. I declined all interview requests. My intention was not to publicly disgrace them, but merely to defend my own dignity. However, the video had an unexpected effect. Young women began reaching out to me, saying they had experienced similar situations. They described my actions as empowering and strong. It's a wild thing, going from ignored to viral sensation. A year later, Wayne and I got married in a small ceremony. It was held in a beautiful garden in Central Park, surrounded by close friends. My grandparents attended, but I did not invite my parents or siblings. You have truly found happiness, Eleanor? My grandmother said with a radiant smile. Yes, Nana, I replied. I've learned to value myself, and I've learned that true family isn't just about blood relations. As we built our new family, I vowed to provide the love and support I had longed for as a child. I wanted us to have our own kids, but I was worried about passing down the Vance family genes. Another year into our marriage, I learned about my old family situation through a call from my grandmother. Kevin has gone bankrupt, she told me. After that social media incident, it became difficult for him to stay at his job, so he quit. And all his high-risk investments failed. His sports car was repossessed, and he's now living in a motel. I wasn't surprised. Ethan had always lacked foresight and could never curb his impulses. His demands for my money had been to support his own lavish spending. Olivia and Brian have divorced, she continued. They've been fighting constantly since the incident. She's moved back into your parents' house with the children. And what about Mom and Dad? I asked, bracing myself. They're struggling. My grandmother carefully chose her words. Your father was forced into early retirement. They don't have enough savings, and it seems they're not doing well with Olivia and the grandchildren there. I nodded quietly. My father had always believed his job was secure and had hardly saved for the future. I occasionally think about my old family. I harbor no hatred towards them, just a sense of loneliness and a bit of sadness. While the wounds from the past may never fully heal, they have made me stronger. They taught me to see myself as valuable and to never compromise on my own worth. I don't know where my life will lead me, but I am excited for my future with Wayne and my grandparents. I hope you like it. This leaves you with a potential cliffhanger at the end. Let me know if you want me to expand any part or create more of it. News of my family's misfortune stirred something within me. Not satisfaction, not vindication, but a deep, unsettling ache. It was like a phantom limb, the severed connection to my past, still throbbing with a dull, persistent pain. Wayne saw the shadow in my eyes. He knew me too well. You're thinking about them, aren't you? He asked softly one evening as we sat by the fire in our living room. The fire crackled and warmed our surrounding, but failed to reach the empty space inside me. I nodded, tracing the rim of my wine glass. I can't help it. It's complicated. Complicated how? He gently prompted, his gaze unwavering. I don't want them to suffer, I confessed. I just wanted them to see me, to accept me. And you got what you wanted, Wayne pointed out, taking my hand in his. Maybe not in the way you expected, but they know. The whole world knows. But at what cost? I whispered, my voice barely audible. They've lost everything. They made their choices, Eleanor, he reminded me, his voice firm. You're not responsible for their decisions. I knew he was right. Logically, I understood that I wasn't to blame, but logic couldn't quell the nagging sense of guilt, the persistent whisper that maybe, just maybe, I could have done something differently. I couldn't tell him, but I even started to blame Nana and Papa for their decision to pay the bill for me in Grand Plaza. If it weren't for that, this event may have been avoided. A few weeks later, Nana Vivian called again. Her voice was weak, strained. Eleanor, dear, I need to ask you something. Something difficult. My heart clenched. What is it, Nana? Your father, he's not doing well. He's been diagnosed with congestive heart failure. The doctors say, well, they say he needs around-the-clock care. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. And they can't afford it, Eleanor. They've exhausted their savings. Olivia's doing her best, but she's barely making ends meet. They're talking about selling the house. I paused, allowing the weight of the information to sink in. The house, the white picket fence, the 2-story colonial that had once been my prison. Now it was a symbol of their impending downfall. I could picture it so vividly. I know I'm asking a lot, dear, Nana continued, her voice trembling. But is there anything you can do? Anything at all? The request hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My family, who had always dismissed me, who had always seen me as less than, were now in need of my help. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me: resentment, pity, guilt, and a strange, unexpected surge of responsibility. I thought of the vows Wayne and I said during our ceremony, and I looked at the engagement ring he offered me, tears welling up my eyes. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I'll do it, Nana, I said, my voice surprisingly calm. I'll help. There was a long, drawn-out silence on the other end of the line. Then, Nana Vivian spoke, her voice choked with emotion. Oh, Eleanor, you have such a big heart. I always knew you did. Don't thank me yet, Nana, I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. I have conditions. The ghosts of Havenwood were calling me back. And this time, I was ready to face them on my own terms. I will have to talk to Wayne about it. He will be shocked when I reveal my conditions. This sets the stage for a potentially volatile confrontation and explores some of the moral ambiguities of the situation. If you want, I can write more about the conditions Eleanor sets and how her family reacts. That night, after Nana and I had ended our call, Wayne found me staring out the window, the Manhattan skyline a blur of indistinct lights. He didn't ask what was wrong. He just wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Tell me, he murmured, his breath warm against my neck. I leaned back against him, drawing strength from his presence. My father is sick. Really sick. He tightened his grip slightly. I'm sorry, Eleanor. They need help, I continued. Around-the-clock care. They can't afford it. Wayne was silent for a moment. And you're going to help them? It wasn't a question. Yes, I said, turning to face him. But on my terms, I'm planning to lay out my conditions to them so they can't come back later to ask for more without fulfilling them. Conditions? He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Yes, I confirmed. I'm willing to pay for his care, but there are things they need to do first. For themselves and for me. Wayne listened patiently as I laid out my plan. It wasn't just about money, it was about accountability, about healing, about finally breaking the cycle of dysfunction that had plagued our family for so long. Wayne listened patiently as I laid out my plan. It wasn't just about money, it was about accountability, about healing, about finally breaking the cycle of dysfunction that had plagued our family for so long. Here are the conditions I needed. A sincere apology. Not the perfunctory, mumbled apologies they had offered at the Grand Plaza. This had to be a genuine acknowledgement of the pain they had caused me over the years, a recognition of their past behavior and its impact on my life. I wanted a letter, a heartfelt, handwritten letter from each of them. Therapy, individual and family therapy. They needed to confront their issues, to understand why they had treated me the way they had, and to learn how to communicate in a healthy, constructive way. It's not just about money, it's about accountability. No contact, initially. Once therapy began, I wouldn't communicate with them directly for 6 months unless it was absolutely necessary. They needed space to work on themselves, to process their emotions, and to develop a new dynamic without my presence constantly stirring up old patterns. It was about healing, about breaking the cycle of dysfunction that has plagued our family for so long. A public acknowledgement. I would have to have a public acknowledgement, something that made it crystal clear that they knew their past behavior was wrong, and a promise to do better. I knew it was a lot, but it was important to me. Wayne was quiet after I finished. He searched my face, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure about this, Eleanor?" he asked gently. "This is a lot to ask of them, and it could backfire. They could refuse." "I know," I said, shrugging, "but I have to try. I can't just write them a check and pretend everything is okay. This isn't about the money, Wayne. It's about respect. Self-respect." He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Then I'm with you. Whatever you need." The next day I called my mother. It took several tries before she picked up. Her voice was hesitant, wary. "Eleanor?" "Mom," I said, my voice neutral. "I heard about Dad." "Yes," she sighed. "It's difficult." "Nana told me you need help," I continued, "that you can't afford his care." Silence, then a cautious, almost hopeful tone. "Yes, well, we were hoping—" "I'm willing to pay for his care, Mom," I interrupted, "but I have conditions." The hope vanished, replaced by a familiar defensiveness. "Conditions? What conditions?" I laid them out, one by one, bracing myself for the inevitable explosion. "I think everything will go downhill at this point." As I finished outlining my conditions, the line went silent. I could practically hear my mother's blood pressure rising. Then, the explosion came. "Are you serious, Eleanor?" she shrieked, her voice laced with fury. "You're going to hold your father's life hostage unless we grovel at your feet?" "It's not about groveling, Mom," I said calmly, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "It's about taking responsibility. It's about acknowledging the pain you caused me." "Pain?" she scoffed. "You're exaggerating. We gave you everything you needed. A roof over your head, food on the table." "But not love, Mom," I interrupted, my voice trembling slightly. "Not acceptance, not a place at the table." "Don't you dare talk to me like that," she roared. "After everything we've done for you?" "What have you done for me, Mom?" I challenged, my voice rising to match hers. "Except make me feel like I was never good enough, except compare me to Ethan and Olivia at every turn, except make me feel like an outsider in my own family." "You were always difficult, Eleanor," she retorted. "You were always different." "Yes, I was different," I agreed. "And instead of celebrating that difference, you tried to crush it. You tried to mold me into someone I wasn't." "Well, we're not going to do this therapy nonsense," she declared. "Richard wouldn't want that." "And the apology letters are out of the question," I added with resignation. "We do not need them either." "And the public apology? Preposterous." "Then I guess we're done here, Mom," I said, my voice flat. "I'm sorry about Dad, but I'm not going to enable your dysfunction anymore." I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. It was over. I had tried. I had offered a lifeline, and they had rejected it. Wayne found me in the bedroom, staring blankly at the wall. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and took my hand. "What happened?" he asked softly. I told him everything. The fight, the accusations, the final rejection. He squeezed my hand, his eyes filled with sadness. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I know you were hoping for a different outcome." "I was a fool to think they would ever change," I said bitterly. "They're incapable of empathy." "Don't say that," Wayne protested gently. "They're just stuck, trapped in their own patterns." "Then let them stay trapped," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm done trying to save them." But even as I spoke those words, a part of me ached. A part of me grieved for the family I had never had, for the love I had always craved. I didn't know if Nana's claim that Dad was sick was true. I wanted to believe that she was telling the truth. A few days later, I received a letter. It was handwritten, postmarked from Havenwood. My heart skipped a beat. It was from Nana Vivian. My dearest Eleanor, I know your conversation with your mother was difficult. And I understand why you set those conditions. You deserve respect, and you deserve to heal. I also know that your mother and father are stubborn, set in their ways. They may never be able to give you what you need. But I want you to know that I am proud of you for standing up for yourself, for refusing to compromise your values. And I want you to know that I love you, unconditionally. With all my heart, Nana Vivian tears streamed down my face as I read her words. It wasn't the apology I had craved from my parents, but it was enough. It was more than enough. I was so worried that Nana was being honest. Maybe she was not. And this was all a scam from my old family. I may never get a real family. Nana Vivian's letter became my anchor, a reminder that even amidst the wreckage of my past, there was still love and support to be found. But the gnawing question remained. What about my father? Could I stand by and watch him suffer even after everything? Wayne noticed the shift in my demeanor, the return of the haunted look in my eyes. He knew I was wrestling with something. "You okay?" he asked one evening as we were preparing dinner. I sighed, chopping vegetables with more force than necessary. "I don't know, Wayne. I keep thinking about Dad, about what Nana said." "And?" he prompted gently. "And I can't shake the feeling that I'm doing something wrong," I confessed, "that I'm being selfish." "Selfish?" he frowned. "Eleanor, you offered to help them. They refused. That's on them, not you." "But what if he dies?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "What if I could have done something and I didn't?" Wayne took my hands, stopping me from chopping the poor, defenseless carrots any further. "Eleanor, listen to me. You can't control their choices. You can't force them to accept help they don't want. You did everything you could. Now, you need to focus on yourself, on our future." His words were comforting, but they didn't fully quell the turmoil within me. I was stuck between my head and my heart, between my desire for self-preservation and my lingering sense of familial obligation. A few days later, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it. "Hello?" I said hesitantly. "Eleanor, it's Olivia." My breath caught in my throat. "Olivia, what do you want?" Her voice was subdued, almost apologetic. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but I thought you should know. Dad's in the hospital." "I know," I said, my voice flat. "Nana told me." "It's worse than she said," Olivia continued. "He's not doing well. The doctors say he doesn't have much time." My heart clenched. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Mom's a mess," Olivia went on. "She's been by his side constantly. She hasn't slept in days." "I can imagine," I said, though I couldn't actually picture my mother as anything other than composed and in control. "Look, Eleanor," Olivia said, her voice cracking. "I know we haven't always been close, and I know we haven't always treated you right. But Dad wants to see you." My breath caught in my throat. "He wants to see me?" "Yes," Olivia confirmed. He said he has something he wants to say to you." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Disbelief, skepticism, a flicker of hope. Was this some kind of trick? Was my family trying to manipulate me one last time? "I don't know, Olivia," I said hesitantly. "I don't know if I can." "Please, Eleanor," Olivia pleaded. "For Dad, just come see him, please." I hung up the phone, my mind reeling. Wayne watched me, his expression concerned. "What was that about?" he asked gently. "Olivia," I said, my voice trembling. "She said, Dad wants to see me. He's in the hospital. He's dying." Wayne took my hands, his eyes filled with empathy. "What are you going to do?" I didn't know. I honestly didn't know. Part of me wanted to run, to hide, to protect myself from the inevitable pain and disappointment. Part of me wanted to go, to see my father one last time, to hear what he had to say. But what if it was just another lie? Another manipulation? Could I risk opening myself up to that kind of pain again? I don't know, I said, shaking my head. I don't know. Wayne pulled me into a hug, holding me tight. Whatever you decide, Eleanor, I'll be with you. Always. Later that night, I found myself staring at an old photograph. It was a picture of my family, taken years ago. We were standing in front of our house in Havenwood, smiling for the camera. My father was standing tall and proud, his arm around my mother. Ethan and Olivia were beaming, their faces full of youthful exuberance. And me? I was standing off to the side, a shy, awkward girl with a book clutched in her hands. I looked at that photograph for a long time, studying each face, each detail. And then I made a decision. I had to go. I had to see my father, if only to silence the ghosts of Havenwood that had haunted me for so long. But this time, I was going on my own terms. I was going as Eleanor Vance, the woman I had become, not the girl they had tried to mold. And I was bringing Wayne. I wasn't going to face them alone. It's up to you if I should go, and what could possibly happen. The drive to Havenwood felt surreal. The familiar landscape, once a source of comfort, now seemed alien and oppressive. Every tree, every house, every street corner held a memory, a reminder of the life I had left behind. Wayne held my hand, his presence a grounding force in the swirling vortex of my emotions. He didn't try to fill the silence with empty platitudes. He simply offered his unwavering support. As we pulled into the parking lot of the Havenwood General Hospital, my heart began to pound in my chest. I felt like I was stepping into a time warp, revisiting a past I thought I had escaped. The hospital room was small and sterile, filled with the beeping of machines and the antiseptic smell of disinfectant. My father lay in the bed, pale and frail. He looked like a shadow of the man I remembered. My mother was sitting by his side, her face drawn and weary. Olivia was standing near the window, her eyes red and swollen. The air in the room was thick with tension. As we entered, my mother looked up, her expression a mixture of surprise and resentment. "Eleanor," she said, her voice barely audible. "Mom," I replied, my voice equally subdued. Olivia stepped forward, offering a hesitant smile. "Eleanor, it's good to see you." "You too, Olivia," I said, though the words felt hollow. My father stirred in the bed, his eyes fluttering open. He focused on me, his gaze weak but intense. "Eleanor," he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "You came." "Yes, Dad," I said, stepping closer to the bed. "I came." Wayne stood back respectfully, giving us space. He was there, a silent guardian, but he wouldn't intrude. My father reached out a trembling hand, and I took it in mine. His skin was thin and papery, his grip surprisingly strong. I wanted to say something," he said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "I wanted to apologize." My heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was this the moment I'd been waiting for all my life? "I know I wasn't always the best father to you, Eleanor," he continued, his voice cracking. "I know I didn't always understand you. I was wrong." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. I had waited so long to hear those words. "It's okay, Dad," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "It's okay." "No, it's not okay," he insisted, his grip tightening on my hand. I let you down. I didn't see your potential. I didn't appreciate your talents. I was so focused on Ethan and Olivia. I neglected you." My mother shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her face tight. "Richard, don't," she said, her voice sharp. "You're tiring yourself." "No, Patricia," he said, his gaze fixed on me. "I need to say this. I need Eleanor to hear it." He took a deep breath, his chest heaving. "I'm proud of you, Eleanor," he said, his voice barely audible. "I'm proud of everything you've accomplished. You're a strong, intelligent woman. And I love you." The tears flowed freely now, streaming down my face. It was all I could do to nod, unable to speak through the lump in my throat. My father closed his eyes, his breathing becoming shallow and labored. "Richard, rest," my mother urged, her voice softening slightly. He didn't respond. He just lay there, his hand still clasped in mine. For a long moment, the room was silent, filled only with the beeping of the machines. Then my mother spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming, Eleanor," she said, her gaze meeting mine. "It means a lot to him." "Of course, Mom," I said, wiping my eyes. "I wanted to be here." Olivia stepped forward, giving me a hug. "Thank you, Eleanor," she whispered in my ear. "You did the right thing." I pulled back, looking at her. "I hope so, Olivia," I said. "I really hope so." Just then, the door to the room swung open and Ethan strode in. He looked at me, his expression a mixture of resentment and something else. Was it guilt? "What are you doing here?" He sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Come to gloat?" The fragile peace in the room shattered. The ghosts of Havenwood were back, and they were ready to fight. This could get ugly fast. What do you want Eleanor to do? Ethan's words hung in the air, thick with venom. The fragile truce that had briefly settled over the hospital room shattered into a million pieces. The ghosts of Havenwood had resurfaced, and they were eager to reignite the old wounds. My hand clenched into a fist. All the raw emotions I had tried to suppress, the years of resentment, the sting of rejection, the ache of unfulfilled expectations, surged to the surface. "Gloat?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "Is that what you think this is about, Ethan? That I came here to gloat? What else could it be?" He sneered, his eyes narrowed. "You finally got what you wanted, didn't you? We're all miserable and you're rolling in money. Must be a great feeling." "You have no idea how I feel," I retorted, my voice rising. "You have no idea what it's like to live with the knowledge that your own family doesn't see you, doesn't value you." "Oh, please," he scoffed. "Don't play the victim, Eleanor. You always thought you were better than us. Too good for Havenwood, too good for your family." "I never thought I was better than anyone," I countered, my voice trembling with anger. "I just wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be loved." "Is that too much to ask?" "It is when you act like you're superior," he shot back. "You always had to be the smartest, the most accomplished. You always had to show us up." "Show you up?" I scoffed. "I was just trying to live my life. I was just trying to be myself. And every time I succeeded, you resented me for it?" "That's not true," he protested, his face flushed. "Yes, it is, Ethan," I shouted, losing control. "You were always jealous of me. You were always threatened by my success. And instead of celebrating it, you tried to tear me down." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Olivia looked away, her eyes filled with distress. My father stirred in the bed, his face contorted with pain. "Enough!" he croaked, his voice weak but firm. "Stop it, both of you!" Ethan and I fell silent, our gazes locked in a bitter stalemate. Wayne stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. "Eleanor," he said softly. "Come on, let's go." I shook my head, pulling away from him. "No, Wayne," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm not leaving, not until I say what I need to say." I turned back to Ethan, my eyes blazing with anger. "You want to know why I'm here, Ethan? I'm here because my father is dying. And despite everything, he's still my father. And I wanted to be here for him." "But you're also here to make us feel guilty," he accused, his voice dripping with cynicism. "Maybe I am," I admitted, my voice softening slightly. "Maybe I am here to make you feel guilty. Because you should feel guilty, Ethan. You should feel guilty for the way you've treated me. You should feel guilty for the way you've treated our family." "And what about you, Eleanor?" he challenged. "Do you feel guilty? Do you feel guilty for selling us out? Do you feel guilty for airing our dirty laundry to the whole world?" "I did what I had to do to protect myself," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to apologize for that." "So you're perfect then?" he sneered. "You've never made a mistake?" "I've made plenty of mistakes, Ethan," I said, my voice softening even more. "But I'm trying to learn from them. I'm trying to be a better person." "Are you?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, his face contorted with anger and resentment. I sighed, shaking my head. "I'm done, Ethan," I said, my voice weary. "I'm done fighting with you. I'm done trying to prove myself to you. I'm done." I turned to my father, who was watching us with a mixture of sadness and exhaustion. "I love you, Dad," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm glad I came." I leaned down and kissed him on the forehead. Then I turned and walked out of the room, Wayne following close behind. As we stepped out into the hallway, I burst into tears. Wayne wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. "It's okay, Eleanor," he murmured in my ear. "It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel hurt." "I just wanted it to be different," I sobbed. "I just wanted us to be a family." "I know," he said, his voice filled with compassion. "I know." We stood there for a long time, clinging to each other, the ghosts of Havenwood swirling around us. The only thing she managed to obtain from her parents was more grief. "Let me know how you'd like to proceed from here." The weight of the encounter in the hospital room settled upon me like a shroud. Sleep offered little respite, and when it came was plagued by fragmented memories and whispered recriminations. Wayne understood. He didn't push me to talk if I didn't want to, but he was always there. A quiet presence, a hand to hold, a shoulder to lean on. One morning, after yet another restless night, I found him sitting on the balcony, sipping coffee and gazing at the city. I joined him, wrapping myself in a blanket against the chill. "Rough night?" he asked gently, without turning around. I sighed, leaning against the railing. "You could say that. I keep replaying everything in my head. What I said, what Ethan said, what I should have said." He turned to face me, his eyes filled with understanding. "That's normal, Eleanor. It's part of the process." "What process?" I asked bitterly. "The process of realizing that my family is irrevocably broken?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "The process of letting go, of accepting that you can't change the past, of forgiving yourself for things that weren't your fault." "That's easier said than done," I retorted. "I know," he said, taking my hand, "but you're stronger than you think. You've overcome so much already." I looked at him, his face etched with kindness and compassion. He had been my rock, my safe harbor throughout this entire ordeal. "I don't know what I would do without you, Wayne," I said, my voice soft. "You wouldn't have to do it alone," he said, squeezing my hand. "That's what we are, Eleanor. A team. Partners." We sat in silence for a while, watching the city awaken. The weight of the ghosts still lingered, but it felt a little lighter now. Later that day, I received a call from Olivia. Her voice was subdued, her tone somber. "Eleanor," she said, "Dad passed away this morning." My breath caught in my throat. "I'm so sorry, Olivia." "He went peacefully," she said. "Mom was by his side." "I'm glad," I said, though the words felt inadequate. "The funeral is on Saturday," she continued, "at the church in Havenwood." "I understand," I said. "Thank you for letting me know." After I hung up, I sat for a long time, staring at the phone. My father was gone. The man who had both wounded and loved me was no more. Wayne found me sitting there, lost in thought. He didn't say anything, just sat beside me and held my hand. "What are you going to do?" he asked softly. I looked at him, my eyes filled with uncertainty. "I don't know, Wayne," I said. "I don't know if I can face them again. Not so soon." "Then don't," he said, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with." "But what if I regret it?" I asked. "What if I regret not saying goodbye?" He sighed, his expression thoughtful. "Eleanor, you said goodbye. You said everything you needed to say in that hospital room. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, least of all, yourself." I thought about his words, turning them over in my mind. He was right. I had said goodbye. I had expressed my love, my anger, my forgiveness. I had done everything I could. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "Okay, I'm not going." Wayne smiled, relief flooding his face. "Good," he said. "Then let's do something for ourselves. Let's get away from here. Let's go somewhere new, somewhere we can just be us." A spark of excitement flickered within me, a chance to escape the shadows of the past, to create a new future. "Where should we go?" I asked, my voice filled with anticipation. "I don't know," he said, shrugging. Somewhere warm, somewhere beautiful, somewhere we can start fresh. An idea suddenly popped into my head, an idea that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. "What about Italy?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "I've always wanted to go to Italy." Wayne's eyes widened, a smile spreading across his face. "Italy?" he said, his voice filled with excitement. "I love it. Let's do it. Let's pack our bags and go to Italy." And just like that, a decision was made. We were leaving. We were leaving behind the ghosts of Havenwood, the pain of the past, the weight of familial obligations. We were embarking on a new adventure, a journey of self-discovery and healing. We would build our own family, and it will only consist of the two of us. We would find a new home, a new life, a new kind of family. Leaving for Italy felt like shedding a skin. Each mile we put between ourselves and Havenwood was a step further away from the pain, the resentment, the unresolved conflicts that had defined my life for so long. We landed in Florence, the cradle of the Renaissance, and the city immediately cast its spell on us. The cobblestone streets, the majestic architecture, the vibrant art scene. It was a feast for the senses, a balm for the soul. We rented a charming villa in the Tuscan countryside, nestled amidst rolling hills and vineyards. The air was thick with the scent of wildflowers and sunshine. Days were spent exploring ancient villages, indulging in delicious food and wine, and simply basking in the beauty of our surroundings. We hiked through olive groves, visited local markets, and learned to cook traditional Italian dishes. Wayne, with his easygoing nature and infectious enthusiasm, thrived in this new environment. He embraced the Italian culture with gusto, learning to speak the language, befriending local artisans, and even attempting to master the art of making pasta from scratch, with varying degrees of success. For the first time in a long time, I felt myself starting to relax. The constant tension that had plagued me for years began to dissipate. I found myself laughing more, smiling more, and simply enjoying the present moment. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since my grandparents had gifted me that sketchbook so many years ago. The Tuscan landscape, with its vibrant colors and dramatic light, became my muse. As I painted, I began to process my emotions, to make sense of my past, and to find a new perspective on my future. The colors flowed onto the canvas, expressing the pain, the anger, the grief, and the hope that swirled within me. Wayne, ever supportive, encouraged my artistic endeavors. He built me a small studio in the garden, filled with natural light and the scent of roses. One afternoon, while exploring a local market, I stumbled upon a small bookstore. The shelves were crammed with old and new books in Italian and English. The air was thick with the scent of paper and ink. As I browsed the shelves, a book caught my eye. It was a collection of poems by an Italian poet I had never heard of, but the title resonated with me: The Art of Letting Go. I bought the book and spent the next few days reading it, slowly translating the Italian verses. The poems spoke of loss, of forgiveness, of the power of love and acceptance. One poem in particular struck a chord with me. It was about a woman who had lost her family, but who had found a new sense of belonging in a foreign land. As I read the poem, tears streamed down my face. I realized that I was that woman. I had lost my family, in a way, but I had found something even more precious: self-respect. I have found someone who loved me for who I was. My partner, Wayne. I have found a new home, a new life, a new kind of family. One evening, as we were sitting on the terrace watching the sunset, I turned to Wayne. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft. "Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for showing me how to let go." He smiled, taking my hand. "You did it yourself, Eleanor," he said. "I just helped you see what was already there." We sat in silence for a while, watching the sky turn from gold to crimson to purple. The crickets chirped in the distance, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. I think," I said, breaking the silence, "I think I'm finally starting to heal." He squeezed my hand. "I know you are," he said, "and I'll be right here, every step of the way." Our lives in Italy were tranquil, too tranquil. I felt the urge to do something. It was time for me to give back. A life of building just my family wasn't a life worth living.